They're schemers. Schemers trying to control their little worlds. I'm not a schemer. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. And here we go.
Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you are all well on this thirsty Thursday. That's it, baby. Today is Thursday, not yesterday. Yesterday was midweek hump, and how the hell did I forget that? But anyway, if you trust me for knowing exactly what day it is, more fool you. More fool you. You obviously have real bad memory, like me, or you haven't been around long enough to know that that is only going to end in disaster. But talking of disasters, we are going to be talking about the now UK leg of the Goncalves family tour, as they attempt to speak to pretty much any media outlet that will listen to them. And look, I understand why they are pretty pissed off. This situation didn't really go as planned. They were hoping that this was going to go to trial and there would be an execution at the end of it. And look, what I will say is, again, I know it's very hard for some people to understand, but I'm not here to say that Bryan Kohberger is innocent of this crime. What people can't seem to get into their tiny, fucked up little brains is that this isn't about understanding whether Bryan Kohberger is innocent. It's about understanding whether the system itself that Bryan Kohberger is within, whether that functioned correctly, whether that was straight and proper, or whether there was things that were done wrong that led to a position where these four victims are just not going to get the justice that they deserve. If Bryan Kohberger is guilty, for instance, he deserved to be executed for this crime, and it would now be very hard to justify future executions in Idaho if they're not willing to execute Bryan Kohberger. The flip side of that coin is this has been left in such a situation where the public evidence, in my opinion, is circumstantial. It feels to me like it's been forced. There's been a forced narrative. There are specific optics around certain things to make us feel a certain way, and that has left us with a position of feeling that not only could Bryan Kohberger potentially not be the person who did this, and perhaps he just took a plea deal because he was leveraged into doing so. At the end of the day, people don't want to die, and you'll be very surprised on what people are willing to do if their life is put on the line. And Bryan Kohberger's life was on the line. Make no bones about it. You know, if the state had a very, very solid case and all of this extra evidence was going to come out during trial that was going to nail this home, then why would Idaho not want to take him to task and execute him? At the end of the day, they are a death penalty state. But look, we can argue this until the cows come home, but I appreciate why the Goncalves family are upset and angered. But look, they ventured onto Piers Morgan's show. And who is Piers Morgan? Piers Morgan, I hear you say. Well, Piers Morgan is a British journalist, and he, at some points in his career, he's been a bit of a twat. But look, the guy says what many people fear to say. He's like the male version of Katie Hopkins, and if you don't know who that is, go educate yourself. She's quite the she's quite the controversy, and he's the same. The downside is I like Top Gear and I like Jeremy Clarkson, and that's then very hard to like Piers Morgan, because these two had a feud going for years that resulted in old Piers getting slapped about by Jeremy. But anyway, let's have a look and see what the Goncalves family have to say on the Piers Morgan interview, and see whether, let's get into it.
Ago, 4 University of Idaho students were stabbed to death as they slept in their home. No motive has ever been revealed for the murders of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin.
Ethan. What is it with people? And there's people who should know fucking better, right? They should know better. What is it about not getting names right? Like he literally he says Xana correctly, Xana Canodal correctly. He says Kaylee Goncalves correctly, which they're generally the names that get fucked up. Do you know what I mean? And then he goes and says Ethan. What? Since when has that even been a fucking name? Ethan is probably the most common name out of all of their names, and he says Ethan. Please, if you're talking about this crime, at least get the victims' names right. Anyway.
Minute plea deal may mean that remains the case forever. Bryan Kohberger, a former criminology student, was due to stand trial next month over his attack that shocked America. But in a plea deal agreed last week, Kohberger pleaded guilty to all 4 murders to avoid the death penalty. The decision has split the families of the victims. Well, joining me now is Kaylee's sister, Olivia, and parents, Steve and Christy Goncalves. Welcome to all of you. Let me just say at the start, I'm a father of 4 children. When I first heard about this story, it is pretty much the ultimate nightmare.
And look, it is this situation, whether you look at the Goncalves and like the Goncalves, and this isn't about throwing shade at the Goncalves, it really ain't. It's about trying to understand how we got to where we got. And sadly, I feel that Steve Goncalves put himself in a position where his behaviour and the way he was out in the public eye could have played a part in where we find ourselves today, and that is by their own definition, a kind of a lack of justice. But look, this is the worst nightmare for any parent. It is. I don't think it can get any worse. And you know, we focus so much on Bryan Kohberger, but I think at times we need to take a moment and just think that this situation is about Kaylee, Xana, Maddie, and Ethan. Do you know what I mean? It's about them, and look, there are ripples to that, and these families have been smashed to pieces. But we will talk about that later as well, because I think some of it has been a little bit self-inflicted, but we'll get there.
For any parent, for any sibling, that your beautiful girl would be taken in this way, in such a monstrous, senseless manner, with her university friends. And my heart just goes out to you. Just before we get into anything else, I just want to tell you how much I felt for you in that moment without knowing you, how much I felt for you since then, and how much I feel for you now, particularly given what has happened. Because, let me start with you, Steve, if I may. You don't know why this person, Kohberger, did this. And you may never know now because of this plea deal that was done clearly without your involvement, your approval. How do you feel about that?
Well, it was done with their involvement. The prosecution did approach him and said, "We are thinking about potentially doing a deal." He went, "Fuck no." Well, that's involvement. It's no different than the house, isn't it? We're thinking about knocking the house down where this happened, pre-trial, burying it in a hole secretly. How do you feel? Fuck no. We're going to do it anyway. That's kind of been the general consensus throughout. But in terms of motive, we may not have ever found a motive anyway. You know, there was no link, no connection. And Bryan Kohberger wouldn't have ever, if he's the person who did it, wouldn't have ever been forced into a place where he had to say motive. And look, in the upcoming sentencing, he may discuss this. He may come out and say something about it. Do you know what I mean? And say, look, this is why I done it. This is how I done it. This is where my old clothes were. This is where you'll find the knife. Who knows?
It was very shocking. I just feel like I'm going through it all over again. It's a different kind of betrayal, because it's a betrayal from somebody who's supposed to be, you know, who's protecting you or supposed to like represent you. So I didn't see it coming. I didn't see something like this happening. I thought there would be clear communications, and things happening, and when it didn't happen.
I want you to let me know down below, right? Because some people in the community, obviously we speak to a lot of people in the community, and they had turned around and said that this was never going to go to trial. If you've been around the channel long enough, you'll know that me and Eddie speak, and Eddie had always said this will never go to trial. This situation will not go to trial. So whatever happens, there'll be something that goes on, and this will not go to trial. Now, let me know down below whether you genuinely thought that this was going to go to trial, because I don't think that this was ever going to go to trial. There was just something about it. This case just didn't seem right, and once you get in the courtroom, that is the stage is set for everyone's skeletons to start falling out of their closets. So for me and Eddie, this in a way couldn't have gone to trial. It literally couldn't have, for the aforementioned reasons. Skeletons start falling out of the closet, and they had to do something. And maybe that's why we find ourselves in this position of Bryan Kohberger having a plea deal situation come about, because there was just too many things that could have likely come out during the trial that would have affected people who didn't want to be affected.
That's why I went to the media, because you guys help people understand what's going on, and if we're silenced, nobody.
I went to the media because you guys help people know what's going on. Let me know what you think of that statement. News Nation. So he got into bed with News Nation because News Nation are able to reach out to their audience and allow them to let people know what's going on. How the fuck does that work? Everybody knows the same thing. Everybody knows exactly what there is. The only things that were put out there that you could deem as relevant or accurate was court documentation. This isn't about going to the media because they let people know what's going on. It's going to media and having discussions with people who will be on your side and help you promote a specific narrative. Now, you could argue that the Goncalves families are right in they're angry, they're upset, they've lost a child. Bryan Kohberger is the person who law enforcement says do it, so you're going to feel a certain way and you want people on your side. But don't lie about why you're going to media. You're going to media because it gives you affirmation, because media generally jump on the guilt bandwagon and help to promote that in all, and could potentially assist tainting a future jury pool. That's what this was about. In my opinion, it was about tainting a potential jury. And before anybody comes at me and says, no, you're talking shit or whatever, Steve Goncalves himself had alluded to the fact that he wanted to go around and interview people in the area, ergo, potential jurors. Out of the horse's mouth.
That the system's broken, and we could do better. We could fix this. We have to fix this. So, like you said, we're probably going to learn about the details of our daughter through this monster's book that he's going to write through his sister or through his professor. And that's not right.
I don't know whether he is just speculating here or there has been rumblings in the background about a book. Do you think Bryan Kohberger will write a book? It would be interesting. I don't know whether Bryan Kohberger himself would write a book. I could imagine Ramsland potentially releasing a book. We know that there's going to be the likes of Howard Blunderbuss. They'll have books, and they had spoken previously, Howard Blunderbuss and Steve Goncalves, on the same podcast, and there was discussions about books and even documentaries and potential films in the future. And bearing in mind the Scream franchise. And this is true, the Scream franchise was inspired by Danny Rowlands. So look, there is a potential that this could fucking haunt everyone. Could fucking haunt everyone for a long time, but I don't think you're going to avoid that. And there's other things you're not going to avoid in this world either. And again, we'll touch on that in a bit.
It's just not right. So we're hope to be wrong, but we're afraid we're going to be right.
Christy, what is it as her mother, you would most like to know? What are the unanswered questions for you,
Listen to this. Pin your ears back.
family, that you think about, that you talk about, that you wish you had answers to?
We really feel in the negotiation with the plea that they could have at least why. And, like what was it that why he chose that house, our daughter, her friends, really why? And not that it would be, and that he did it solely by himself. I know that he admitted his guilt, but there are still people saying, yeah, he admitted his guilt, but I don't think that he worked alone, and for him to say, I take 100% full responsibility, me, myself, only, it just would help with some closure, constantly seeing people protect him and just putting it out there where you can't protect him anymore,
And look, let's just talk about this for a second, right? Because I get it that there are some content creators out there who are flat out protecting Bryan Kohberger, and some people argue, look, you're protecting Bryan Kohberger, and I'll stay steadfast in it's not about, for me, it isn't about protecting Bryan Kohberger. It's about looking at the evidence that has been presented to us, understanding that there's issues with that evidence. Everybody goes on about how strong the evidence is and how the evidence just got stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, while on the flip side of it, ignoring the fact that the DNA was trace DNA, and it was on a sheath that wasn't seen through the first walkthrough, it was seen through the second walkthrough. We then find ourselves in a position where they get a sample from it, they put it through CODIS, don't get a hit. They send it to another lab, they then send it to another lab. It ends up with the FBI, and then the FBI comes back and says, right, this is the name you want. Riley Nolan turns around and says, well, the FBI never said that it was Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath. You also find out that there's other DNA samples in the area of this crime, not only on the sheath itself, but on the hand railing, on a glove, under Madison Mogan's fingernails. And all of these things, historically, will point to the fact that there is somebody else involved in this. So even if Bryan Kohberger is guilty of this crime, it's about understanding, is he the only person guilty of this crime? Did he have help? Is he somebody who came in the aftermath of this crime? Was he the designated driver and went into the house? Who knows? But you want the victims of this crime to obtain justice, and the only way you'll do that is to get the person or persons who did it and run them through a non-corrupt system, and for them to be punished at the end of it. And again, the evidence that I've seen, like the car, I don't look at any of that footage and say definitively, oh yeah, that's definitely Bryan Kohberger's car. I know that. And you've even got Bill Thompson during the plea hearing making statements that, again, raise alarm bells. The fact that he knew where Bryan Kohberger was, he knew he went to an ATM, and yet he made it seem like he wanted to make it look like Bryan Kohberger had gone to the house the following day. They talk about 22 times or 23 times where Bryan Kohberger would come over to Moscow, Idaho from Washington, but then you look at the numbers and it looks like Bryan Kohberger just frequented the area once a week throughout the duration he was there. And Taylor turned around and said, but you know what he was doing there. And they even rebutted her when she spoke about them trying to make him out to be a stalker, where they turn around and say, we never place him at the house. We never said he was at the house. We don't place him at the house. They place him connected to a tower that doesn't even provide service to the house, but to within 100 meters of. So all of these little intricacies of the information, it makes it difficult to definitively say, yeah, he's definitely guilty. He definitely done it on his own. Fuck him. Let's be done with it. It just we're just not there yet. But the Goncalves family seem to be in a position where they need closure on whether he did it on his own, whether somebody else was involved. Steve Goncalves, they didn't have to go upstairs. Was he talking about they as in multiple people, or just they as in the person who did this? Who knows? But I certainly have had information, as you know, passed to me, a conversation between Christie and a third party that would seemingly suggest that they do believe that there are multiple people involved in this crime. And it is about sorting this one out and then going after the others. But I don't know how much truth is in that, because you don't know what to believe and what not to believe, do we? But there we go. Let's listen to the last bit of this.
People can't, they can't continue to say things that to side with him, to make him look like he's innocent, because he is totally guilty. And I know that he did say that he did it. There's just some details that I think that could have came out that would have definitely made him seal his guilt and help the families, at least our family. I can't speak on behalf of the other families, and maybe they didn't want to know some of that information, but we did.
Olivia, I mean, obviously part of the turmoil this may have created is that he's admitted everything, but by doing so, he avoids the death penalty in a state where he could have been executed. So you may never know whether this is a sincere admission of full guilt or not, because of course he had an absolute vested interest in pleading guilty. He does.
So again, like Piers Morgan says here, it is about that, and and he's right to say this. Everybody can feel a certain way about it. You can feel a certain way. Do you know what I mean? Some people will feel that Bryan Kohberger is innocent of this crime. Some people will feel that he's absolutely guilty of this crime. Olivia will go on to say that she is absolutely 100% sure that he is guilty of this crime. Absolutely. They talk about the evidence, so on and so forth, but they haven't, I believe, seen any more than what we have. So it's just an interpretation thing. How do you interpret the information that you've got in front of you, and how much do you need to convince you? And some people are much more easier to convince than others because they have more trust in the authorities than some people. And they don't know what happens out in the wider world to people who they do get railroaded into taking pleas that are for, they're innocent of the crime. I'm not saying Bryan Kohberger is innocent of this crime. I'm just saying that with everything taken into consideration, would I put my own children's life on the line to say that, yeah, I'm convinced Bryan Kohberger is guilty of this crime and he did it on his own? And I don't think if people genuinely had skin in the game and were put under the cosh like that, that they would be as certain as what they think they are. It's very easy to be certain when there are no ramifications to your thoughts and feelings. It is just the way it is. But here we go.
Die as a consequence.
Yeah, I do understand that point. I know, and I knew from the very beginning, he is 100% guilty. There's not a doubt in my mind.
And I've got to interject here. Like, when she says she knows he's guilty, she knows he's 100% guilty, that's because of her interpretation of the information that she has, which, as far as I'm aware, is no different than the information that we have. So the fact that she says Bryan Kohberger is 100% guilty doesn't mean anything in the grander scheme of things. It is personal opinion. And the truth doesn't care about feelings. It doesn't care about your thoughts. It doesn't care about whether you're related to the victim. The truth is the truth. Facts are facts. And ultimately, that's where we are at this point in time. We're in this void where we don't honestly know what has gone on here. But something's gone wrong. Something somewhere along the lines has gone wrong. Because if everything was going fine and everything was going to plan, this would have gone to trial. And that's it. Something went wrong here. And that's what we'll never get to know. Well, we may do.
He can play whatever cards he would like to now. But for us, I do think that frustration was, in exchange for your life, there are ways that you can kind of vindicate some of these others that have kind of been lost in this. And I'm talking about the roommates, I'm talking about the boyfriends, I'm talking about all of the innocents who were, innocent bystanders to this, where for me personally, I don't care about his why. I'm looking for hard facts. Where's the murder weapon? Let's recover it. What were you wearing that night? Where did you purchase it? I'm looking for facts to prove without a shadow of a doubt that this is and always has been the sole perpetrator of this crime.
Which I agree with, which we don't have. So again, without those elements, how can you be 100% sure? Now, you can be 99.99999% sure, but can you genuinely be 100% sure when there is absence to the information? Like Olivia says, we want to know what you wore. Where did you get it? Not so much where you got it, but I'd want to know where the fuck you put it. Where is it? Where is it now? How did you get out of the house and into your car without transferring anything into your car? What did you do? How did you do that? And where did you put the weapon? Where is it? I'd want that information. I would want something that absolutely 100% puts me in a position where I know that the guy was there. The only other question then is, was he there on his own?
Because I have doubts in my mind, but because a lot of the conspiracy theorists online and a lot of the people who were accused in this process deserve to know it was him alone by himself, and that is the end of it.
Steve, how difficult is it as a family to live in an internet world and a social media world when something as appalling as this happens to rip your family apart, and you have to deal with endless conspiracy theories, endless...
And I'm going to have to interject here again, right? Because what I'm going to say is, like, Piers Morgan will turn around and he says, you live in a social media world. No, we live in a world that has social media. We live in a world that has social media. It's part of the world. But you don't have to interact with it. You do not have to go balls deep into bed with the likes of News Nation. You don't have to track it. You don't have to monitor it. You can decide what videos you watch and what videos you don't watch. You are in full control of what you do when it comes to social media. You do not have to have anything to do with it whatsoever. There are people who will not fucking know about the Idaho 4 case. They won't know about any of the things around it. There are people who knows about the Idaho 4 case, but the only reason they know about it is because of mainstream media. They won't come onto social media and look at it. They don't know who I am. They don't know who Jules is. They don't know who Crime Circus is. They don't know who Ashley Banfield is. They don't know who Megyn Kelly is. They don't know who Christina Randall is. They don't know who all these people are. And they certainly haven't got anything about this case into their brains through this as a conduit. You choose to interact with it. You choose to watch the videos that will piss you off. You choose to keep watching channels that you know on your side, or they're questioning things. You choose. So don't choose and then fucking moan about it. Don't do that. It's like trolls who come over here, that they'll come over and they'll comment or they'll look at a video that I've done and then they'll fucking whinge about it. And I'll say, you don't walk into a fucking pub and then complain that they're selling beer, do you? Do you know what I mean? Just, a man don't walk the plot unless he's looking to buy. That's the issue here. If you're here, if you're interacting with it, then you're going to receive it. You can't be on here to react with it, to receive it, and then fucking moan that you've received it. Shut it off. Keep away from it. Ignore it. That's it. That's it. But look.
About endless attention, scrutiny, and so on. Does that make it all just 100 times worse?
I don't like to feed it, but yes, it is hell to go through it, to be
I don't like to feed it.
attacked over and over again, and then to think that there's some system that can protect you when there really isn't anyone there to protect you. It's eye-opening, and you're just sitting there going like, how can people just lie about us? How can people write books and not even know us? You know, how like I'm used to sports where they have.
I have to say, right, they moan and they whinge about people saying bad stuff about them and writing books and things like that and this, that, and the other. Now, they do go on to speak about the fact that they've been threatened and things like that. In fact, we don't need to look any more at that. They talk about Kaylee and how amazing Kaylee is, which we understand that. She seemed like an amazing girl. And he just goes on here just to continue talking about social media and the fact that they've had pictures of their house taken, that they had been accused of actually doing the crime themselves, that Steve had been involved in it, which that in itself, I think that's fucking ludicrous. Do you know what I mean? If somebody thinks that Steve Goncalves physically did this crime, then you probably need to stay away from social media and this crime and any computer and probably anything that's sharp. But look, the issue that I have with this situation is that Steve Goncalves, they formed this social media platform it's got 80,000 members plus now, I believe. 80,000 members. And they would be constantly on the attack of Bryan Kohberger before he was found guilty of this crime. So, yes, in hindsight, you can look back and say, well, that was justified because he's pled guilty, so fuck him. But the reality is up to the point where he has gone through the system and there has been a determination through a jury, or in this situation where he pleads guilty, then respectfully, his constitutional rights mean that he should be protected. He should be in a position where he can be given the benefit of the doubt. So up to that point, you should keep your fucking mouth shut. When you are somebody who is an American citizen yourself and you are trampling all over the rights of the individual that's been accused just because it makes you fucking feel better, you can't rarely then turn around and say, well, people are fucking moaning and whinging about us, they are being horrible, they are accusing us this, that, and the other, when from a legal standpoint, you're doing exactly the same. In fact, you are getting several thousands of people involved in attacking an individual or feeling a certain way about an individual, and you're using falsities in order to further do that. The kill kit, for instance, the touching Wi-Fi, for instance, the stargazing shit. Do you know what I mean? He was seen by an individual. He was caught and seen, which we don't know what the truth is of that now, and we probably won't ever fucking know. But the point being, you was as much giving it out as you was receiving it. Again, there was elements I do not absolutely fucking agree with. Like I say, accusing him of doing the crime himself was fucking insanity. But to take a bit of a roasting because you're fucking out in you like I say, you're balls deep in the media and you're out there every single opportunity that you get to fucking sling mud and have a pop, then that's gonna come back. It's gonna come back. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, because you're going to get it. I get it. Everyone gets it. Every single fucking person who has anything to do with the media and being online of any degree, you're going to get attacked at some point. And if you try and please everyone, you'll please no one. Let me know down below what you think, and I'll catch you all in the next one, where we talk about Jumpsuit Pablo. Will Bryan Kohberger become an area knight? Or will he be killed? Love you all. Mwah.